reason I made these two pieces, they're going to be these. So I've gotten the cage done. It's sent off to paint. It just went this week. I'll be getting it back in I don't know, a few days or maybe another week. But in the meantime, we're going to work on finishing up some other items. So I mounted the cage in the car, ran all the wiring. I didn't record any of that because it's just typical stuff. The wiring harnesses with this kit are really easy. It's basically just power ground and a switched ignition. We have this temporary panel that everything was mounted to. We had the compressors up here, the controller here, and the airlines coming through. And I used it for mock-up to build myself a whole new panel, which is sitting here. So everything got mounted in the car. It worked properly. I tested the system, put it out in the car show. Everybody got to see it. And now we're going to go ahead and finish everything up. It looked like this. So now that we're back here, what we're going to do today is we are going to figure out how exactly we want to run the airlines. Before, I just had the rubber or the plastic airlines coming up through the panel and then curling into the controller. It worked well, but I believe over time it's just going to kink the lines. So I want to go ahead and move to something different. What I've done here is made a mock-up panel, and I have these through connectors and our bulkhead connectors mounted up, and we're going to do a piece of hard line that is bent and goes in like this to go up to the controller. So what I'm going to do is lay out the holes for these guys to mount to this panel and then get the hard lines bent and put into place. So the design I have will have all the lines running from the connectors up to the controller, and then I'll have small bends to get a straight, smooth connection. So that's what we're going to do here is we are going to go ahead and pretty much do the same thing that I did in this test piece. Bend all the lines, make sure everything works out right, and then that will all get mounted over here on this panel so that the hard lines will go into the controller, and then from the bottom I'll have all the plastic lines running to their corresponding airbag or intake and exhaust. Let's get started doing our layout. Pretty good with this layout right here. So we'll go ahead and start getting our layout. What I have to do is create a recess in the back of the panel for these connectors to sit in. This I just did with a little paddle bit, but I'm going to grab the router, do the layout, and cut out a section on the back so I don't have to worry about putting that paddle bit in there and everything being uneven. So let's take all this stuff off, start doing our layout, and get started. So this is where these guys are going to live. I might move this controller forward and back a little bit. Right now I got a few reference measurements. This worked out pretty well, but these holes are pretty close. They were roughly 5 inches from the mounting points of the controller. That puts us here. And I'm not sure if that's going to interfere with the bars underneath because of how wide I need to have these holes to account for these bulkhead fittings. So I'm going to do a couple of measurements real quick, make sure I like where this guy sits, and then we'll just go ahead and start laying out where these bulkhead fittings are going to go. Right now, this is what it looks like.
Me
So I've got my layout here of the back of this board, and we are going to take a router and then cut out about 3/8 of this material, and then we'll go on the front and we'll drill all of our holes for everything to pass through. I made a template to show you guys what it looked like when I'm finished. I wanted to make sure I could have a clean product once I got done. So this is what we're going to look like. Here's the top side, and then we are going to put these bulkhead connectors through from the back, and then it'll sit just like that. So on the top you'll have this guy coming through, and on the back you'll have your 90, so that your airlines can go up to each bag, and it'll be hidden. Let's fire up the router and the shop vac and get this guy cut out. So we've got our holes here, and we went ahead and test fitted these guys, these bulkhead fittings to go in here. So we looking pretty good. It looks like our depth is good. So we'll be able to get a couple of threads of each one of those rings that hold these guys in place. So let's get these guys put in, and we will go ahead and start mounting everything else and running our airlines, or bending the hard lines. So this is what we have. This is how the controller is going to sit in comparison to these bulkhead fittings. We're going to bend up some aluminum hardline to go from these bulkhead fittings into the controller. Now I've bent this one up just as a mock-up. I had some other ones that were pretty crazy looking. I played around with a few ideas, even from bending up like this guy and then just keeping it simple like what we have here. I think that's what we're going to go with. So right now I'm going to go ahead and draw a couple of reference lines and then start bending up this line after I clean the tube off so it looks nice and clean before I stick them in here. I think the hard part here is going to be getting these all the same length here at the controller. So the next order of business is to draw a reference line here for where everything breaks. These lines are going to come out of the bulkhead fittings and up to the controller, but I have the bulkhead fittings wider than the controller, so at some point I'm going to have to make a bend to go up into the controller and make sure that the connections are straight, we don't have any air leaks, and they also go in correctly. So I'm going to draw a reference line here, probably half the distance between the bulkhead fittings and the controller, and that's where I'll put my 45-degree angles or 30 or 20 or whatever I need to make all these guys go in. They're all going to be different, but at that point they're all going to be the same distance apart from each other at the beginning and the end, so in the middle it'll look pretty uniform. So let's draw this line, about 3 inches here. So I'll just come to 1.5, and that'll be where our bend lives. So I'm going to get these lines drawn on here, and then I'm going to get the hard line prepped and cleaned before I start fitting it, and then I'm going to cut everything to length a length that I can use. I'm gonna start making my bends and going from there. But first I'm gonna lay everything out between all these points so I can kind of have an idea of how it's all gonna lay out and then show you guys what it's gonna look like. So what I've done is bent these lines up, cut them to fit, and I put little 45-degree bends at that reference line halfway up between the controller and these bulkhead fittings. That gave me kind of a uniform spot to make all these lines go up into the controller. I also cut out a spacer that goes up under the controller to get the controller off the board, and that it makes it a little bit easier. The way these lines are, I don't have a lot of room to bend back down and go into the controller, so we just lifted the controller up for easier installation. I'm gonna go ahead and get this ripped apart, start prepping this board, and then we'll get it ready to pour the epoxy coating on top of it. So we're back from paint. We have the bars back, we have the mounts and everything. They sprayed them this mint color. It looks really good. Not a whole lot of prep work was needed for these, just need to get the mill scale off and then they can spray them. So we got these back in pretty quick time. Now all we need to do is get back in the car and reassemble everything. I want to show you guys what I did in the back seat. I took 1/8 inch bar and bent it up to contour the back seat, put fiberglass over top of that, and then stretched the carpet over it to hide what was there. So I'm going to show you guys that, and then we'll start putting the bars back in, then we'll start prepping that panel for the airlines and everything else. Alright, so here's the back seat area. It's nothing special. Like I said, I just took some bars and then stretched some fiberglass and made a panel. I'll probably put a picture like right here of what I did. And then put this carpet over top of it, just a cheap black carpet over top so it'll cover up the fiberglass and everything. And then I made some relief cuts and got the seat belts down into it. It's just gonna hide everything. All the action is going on back here with the air tanks, so I really didn't need to do much to get this hidden back here. So let me go ahead and finish bolting up these seat belts, and after that's done, we'll go ahead and start setting that cage in and figuring out what we want to do with this carpet. I think I'm going to have to trim around the bars and then let it sit so that you don't pin that carpet down. The battery and everything is underneath this panel here and all the airlines, and you want to be able to access all that without having to unbolt the system. So I went ahead and got this panel set down in the car. I have these screws I'm putting in to mount everything in place on the tabs. I use these little collars right here to help dress up the screws a little bit. I don't like these screws, but it's the only thing local that I had. I wanted to go with an Allen key type screw, but they didn't have them. So for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and go with these Phillips head screws for the mounting. They're gonna work for now. I can change them out later. That's not too big a deal. If the owner doesn't like it, we'll just order new hardware. I got the sizes all written down, so we're good to go. So what I did before I set this panel up in here is I pulled up all the air lines from under the car up under the panel, and I labeled them with blue packing tape for their individual corners. Hopefully I didn't screw that up. But I'm gonna go ahead and get up underneath here right now and get these air lines hooked to the corresponding bulkhead fittings. I'll show you guys what I got going on here. We'll put all these in, and then we'll also go ahead and start pulling up the cable for the controller. I'll probably do that right now. So off camera, I went ahead and got the solenoids for the air compressors wired up. It's just a hot and a ground, and then I also went ahead and wired up the compressors. It's not very difficult. It's pretty straightforward. If you can do any wiring or audio wiring, you can get this done. The only thing I have left to do is to install this air-water separator in line with the inlet to the controller, and then this tank drain on one of the tanks where it's easily accessible, just in case you need to get all the air out of the system without using the controller, or if you lose power or something like that. So I'm gonna get these guys hung and plumbed in, and then we'll be ready to test the system. So we are at the point to where this thing is pretty much wrapped up. I need to still fire up the system, make sure everything works. I haven't tested anything out yet. So right now I'm just putting this panel back in, cover my battery area, make sure everything works. I think I'm gonna have some interference up here with the airlines and stuff, but it's not pinching anything, so I'm pretty good with what we have. So I got this down. I'm gonna go ahead and fire up the system and make sure everything works. I'll fill everything up with air and check for leaks. I have all the system previously run, so I know all the bags are good and I've checked everything. So let's go ahead and get this thing fired up, check for leaks, make sure everything functions correctly, and then I can clean up everything and set it on the ground and make sure everything works like it should. So the good thing about the airlift system is that it is Bluetooth, so I have everything, the key on up front, and what I'll do is I'll just turn the system on back here at the disconnect, and then let it connect, and then go from there. All right, so I found the first leak. Looks like I have a leak at the drain. So I'm gonna go ahead and shut the system down. Disconnect that, and I guess fix it. So we've let the car sit overnight. We've checked everything for air leaks. The tanks and everything seem to be holding air. There is one bulkhead fitting that has some air seeping out of it. I just mixed up some soap with some water in a bottle and poked a hole in it and sprayed it on there, and noticed that there were some air bubbles coming out because that right side was a little low this morning. So I'm going to order a couple new bulkhead fittings, replace those, and everything should be done. So this concludes the video on this air ride suspension. I'll walk you guys through the car and then we'll see it in operation. And that's it. So here is the finished product of the airlift system in the back of this RSX. You can see the hard lines that go through the bulkhead, and then the square tanks and everything associated with it. I have the carpet put back over so it's nice and clean and you don't see any of the wires. I'll go ahead and walk you guys down in the car so you can see everything from the other angle. So I'm going to pull you off this stand and we'll walk around here and see the rest of the design. I'll get you guys inside the car. You can see we've got our controller and our hard lines. Here's the compressors, and then the lines from the front of the compressors go down into the square tanks. The square tanks are pretty nice. They give you a little bit of a different mounting option. Get in this car. So here is inside the car, a little tight, but you got the square tanks. Here's the brackets holding them up. On the bottom. There's your view from inside the car. So we're going to go ahead and go through the operations of the air ride system. I'll put you guys back on the stand and then we'll operate it remotely. All right guys, I'm going to go ahead and fire up the system and go through all the functions that it has. I'll air out all the way, pick it back up, and put it back at ride height. I want to thank you guys for watching this video series. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions on anything I did or about this system, feel free to hit me up. You can either hit me up on the YouTube page or on my Instagram page. Thanks again, guys.